Welcome to the Explainer. We're actually going to skip the usual long introductions today because we really just need to jump straight into the deep end of Anna Lily Amirpour's dense, hallucinatory, and literally just wildly vibrant masterpiece, Mona Lisa and the Blood Moon. We are going to unpack exactly how this neon gothic thriller uses a wild supernatural premise to deliver a totally grounded and honestly pretty unsparing critique of what it takes to survive in the modern world. Okay, let's dive into this. On the surface, sure, it kind of looks like a classic fish-out-of-water sci-fi thriller, right? We follow Mona Lisa Lee, this innocent, otherworldly young woman who busts out of a clinical psychiatric prison and just wanders into the dark fairy tale underworld of New Orleans. But here's the thing. Amirpour absolutely refuses to hand us a comfortable superhero origin story. Instead, she drops our protagonist right into a hyper-capitalist playground where literally everything from physical intimacy to basic safety has a price tag. So what actually happens when you drop a pure cipher, someone who just stares at the world with the unblinking gaze of a newborn child, into this total sensory minefield? Well, to really get to the heart of what this film is doing, we have to establish its theoretical framework. We have to ask a really visceral, deeply uncomfortable question. Who actually owns your body? Think about it. Every single major character in this movie is locked in this relentless struggle to just maintain control over their own physical form, their time, and their destiny. And the crazy part? They're simultaneously trying to extract that exact same agency from everyone around them. The answer to that question really comes down to the core concept that defines the film's entire visual and psychological structure: bodily autonomy. Put simply, this is your right to self-governance over your own physical body, completely free from external coercion. You see, Mona Lisa has this terrifying telepathic ability to take absolute physical control of another human being's musculature. When she uses this power, her victims are completely conscious but entirely powerless to stop their own bodies. It's wild to watch, but this supernatural conceit, it's actually a brilliant, grounded critique of bodily exploitation. It is a literal, physicalized metaphor for the invisible systems of coercion that dictate life under late-stage capitalism.
So let's look at part one, the institutional cage, where Mona's subverted hero's odyssey begins, locked away in this cold, clinical, psychiatric institution, sitting out on the swampy periphery of the city.
For 10 long years, Mona Lisa has been subjected to the absolute dominion of institutional power, a whole decade in a catatonic, straitjacketed state. But here's the fascinating part. Her near-total muteness isn't a lack of intelligence at all. Actually, scratch that. It's more like a pre-verbal, hypervigilant defense mechanism. Think about it. When any expression of selfhood is punished, dissociative silence basically becomes a fortress. She evaluates the world purely on immediate physical energy and raw human intent. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how cinematographer Paweł Pogorzelski uses specific colors to map out Amirpour's brilliant color symbolism. The asylum is just bathed in this acid green and jaundice yellow, literally the colors of systemic sickness and institutional rot. But the second Mona escapes into the city, boom, the palette violently shifts to hot pink and electric blue. This represents Bourbon Street, synthetic desire, and hypersexualized capitalist grift. Finally, the rarest colors, crimson and lunar silver, are reserved strictly for the sky and the blood moon itself. Those symbolize cosmic liberation, ancient truth, and Mona's primal power. You can literally track her psychological liberation just through the film's hues.
And it's not just the lighting carrying all this thematic weight. We also need to look at the objects of oppression. Amirpour meticulously places these very specific physical objects throughout the narrative that serve as potent metaphors for state and capitalist control.
And this brilliantly illustrates how the film weaves its underlying critique right into the physical world. Take the straitjacket Mona wears in the opening. That's a clear metaphor for the total suppression of the individual by the state. Later on, we see the ATM become this dark altar of capitalist extraction, where human connection is just reduced to a mechanical transaction. Then there's Officer Harold, the cop relentlessly hunting Mona. He's forced to wear this massive plaster light cast after she uses her power on him. That cast represents the rigid, crippled nature of systemic authority. It's an institution that absolutely refuses to adapt, preferring to just hobble along in pursuit of vengeance rather than actually question its own broken structure. Which brings us right into part two, neon and capitalist grifts. Things speed up fast here as Mona shatters that institutional cage and is thrown headfirst into the chaotic, aggressive ecosystem of Bourbon Street. It is right here, in this chaos, that Mona meets Bonnie Bell, a fierce, desperate, exotic dancer played absolutely beautifully by Kate Hudson. Bonnie operates as this tragic, devouring mother archetype.
The second she recognizes the immense financial potential of Mona's mind control, she immediately commodifies her. I mean, she takes Mona in, sure, but she swiftly transforms her into a lucrative human ATM asset. It drives home a brutal message. Under the crushing weight of systemic poverty, the exploited will inevitably exploit the vulnerable just to survive.
Visually, the film is continuously contrasting these environments. Bourbon Street's artificial neon glare represents inescapable surveillance and commercialized excess. And what's amazing from a technical standpoint is how Amirpur utilizes ultra-wide-angle lenses with this pronounced edge distortion. It literally forces you to actively feel the claustrophobia and the intense sensory assault of this place. On the flip side, the deep shadow of the New Orleans night represents true freedom, protective anonymity, and hidden truths. When Mona is in the shadows, she is finally safe from the predatory eyes of a state and a society that only wants to use her. In the midst of all this frantic energy, we enter Part 3, the supernatural holy fool. This is where we witness Mona's silent, telepathic mind control abilities, acting as a massive equalizer of power.
So the crucial point is that Mona Lisa essentially embodies the ancient archetype of the holy fool. Completely baffled by paper money or consumerism, she relies entirely on her pre-verbal intuition and possesses zero desire for wealth. When she uses her power, she simply acts as a mirror, violently redirecting the coercive dynamics of whatever environment she's in, especially the panoptic state she just escaped. If you approach her with violence, she reflects that violence right back at you. If you approach her with basic kindness, she responds with absolute loyalty. She is the ultimate equalizer.
And that leads us to Part 4, Outcasts and True Connection. Let's transition to the sanctuaries found in the dimly lit, marginalized fringes of the city, because this is where the genuine emotional core of the film actually resides. Just look at this stark visual juxtaposition. On one hand, you have Bonnie Bell, whose entire relationship with Mona is built on transactional exploitation. But on the other hand, you have Fuzzy. He's this eccentric, heavily tattooed drug dealer who acts as a benevolent trickster. He literally just wants to share his snacks and play music for her with zero expectations. And then there's Charlie, Bonnie's neglected, parentified 10-year-old son. Charlie sees Mona not as a tool for financial gain, but as a fellow discarded soul. These outcasts offer Mona pure, non-transactional safety, proving that genuine connection is the only true currency of survival. The narrative tension finally boils over in Part 5, The Alchemical Escape. Everything comes to a head in this climax under the massive steel structure of the bridge, where the illusion of female solidarity completely shatters. Cornered by the police, Bonnie's maternal mask just totally drops. In an absolute panic over losing her cash cow, Bonnie demands that Mona launch a dangerous psychic assault on the cops. And in this split second, Mona finally perceives the transactional truth. Bonnie's affection is entirely dependent on Mona's utility as an asset. But instead of lashing out with violence, Mona executes what's basically an alchemical severing. She quietly, deliberately withdraws her power. She forces Bonnie to look down at the mud, breaking their contract, and just walks away. It's such a devastating critique of how capitalism corrupts sisterhood, leaving Bonnie completely abandoned to her own structural traps.
Let's move to and see how this builds. If you look at this timeline, we can map out a complete chronological evolution of Mona's psychology. She begins in catatonic silence, totally captive to the state in the asylum. She escapes, only to become a commodified weapon under the free market demands of Bourbon Street. But by finally severing those ties with Bonnie, she evolved into a fully autonomous individual, making her final sprint for the ultimate symbol of modern transition, the airport.
At the airport, with the police closing in fast, little Charlie makes a heartbreaking, purely altruistic choice. Rejecting his mother's transactional survivalism, he deliberately creates a chaotic distraction, drawing the entire security apparatus onto himself. He sacrifices his own freedom so Mona can slip through the gates and board the plane into the unvarnished morning light. Mona secures her physical autonomy, yes, for sure, but it comes at the tremendous cost of leaving behind the only unique, genuine bond she formed. As Mona stares out the window of that ascending plane, finally her own master, we are left with a lingering, truly memorable question to ponder. In a world engineered for surveillance, extraction, and systemic exploitation, does true freedom in modern society require absolute isolation? What really is the price of independence? It's a heavy thought to carry, but an absolutely crucial one to take away from this neon-drenched odyssey.